Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Top Agent Nation Commercial Wednesday. Really exciting as we are furthering expanding the commercial real estate world from not just brokerage, as many people do, transactions, leases, and even business brokerage to much, much more. We were talking about construction development, finance. One big part is
One more
corporate services. Many people do not know or understand
that I
the corporate
received
service realm.
was
And what we
something
want
that
to do is
industry
really go
participants
deeper so
provide.
people really understand what corporate services really is and really how does it help your business. And I know that next speaker had been in corporate service for a good long time, not just running small companies in his team, but larger companies. And from what I learned from one of my mentors, and Fred Schmidt, that was president of Coldwell Banker Commercial, he told me when the market turned south that it was one of the largest profit centers for Coldwell Banker Commercial. So many people have to understand and learn it's not just transactions, it's not just capital markets, it's maybe not even just development, but how do you plug into a larger system to scale your business and really add other people? And I know through the Renaissance Network, it really helps everyone scale into a global force to connect with other like-minded individuals so you can also build your business and also send referrals and leads, especially in corporate services. So I'm here to introduce Bill Hinson. So Bill, I'm really excited because of your longtime experience with corporate services and really here teaching, many people within the business. And I know for you and also Fred Schmidt were teaching it at one time to get people interested in understanding what corporate services was. To those that actually could run a corporate service group, right? They're very different skill sets as you want to win the business. So Bill, if you don't mind, introduce yourself and sharing, what corporate service is and really how can you get involved. And I know you're going to share a little bit about the course. It's not everything, but you're going to tease everyone a little bit.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. Max, did you have something you were trying to break in earlier? No?
Go ahead, Bill. It's okay.
All right. Okay. So what I've done here is this is something that I want to share with you. And interestingly, Jim, it wasn't just that corporate services carried, excuse me, carried Coldwell Banker Commercial. For that period of time, there was an early time right when COVID hit, or I'm sorry, before that, we were in a recession, and actually the accounts that we were doing with our corporate services, Global Client Solutions at the time, actually made Coldwell Bankers numbers. That's how big it was. I mean,
Wow.
yeah. So they were not going to hit their numbers. Coldwell Banker Residential was not going to hit its numbers, and then the money that we contributed through corporate services actually brought them up to where they were. And none of the other brands at the time, it's Anywhere and then now Compass, but prior to that, it was Realogy. None of the other Realogy brands hit their numbers at that time, only Coldwell Banker, and it was because of corporate services. So interesting how profitable that work can be.
And Bill, that's why it was so important that I know in commercial, different from residential, many of the large firms, CB, JLL, that you've worked at, right? They all have these different verticals from a capital markets group, from a corporate service group. And you just need that, right? In commercial real estate, if you're in a large, you know, full service, right? We call them full service firms, right? That kind of do it all. And obviously there's a lot of multinationals, but I didn't know that you guys made all their numbers.
Yeah, and also at JLL during COVID, the corporate services group was actually the one that carried JLL through that period because transactions had stopped. So all of the transactions that they were, that they had counted on and was 50% of their business just dropped off a cliff. And it was the corporate services group that saved JLL during that period. And I'm sure you'd find out the same thing with CBRE, Cushman, and Colliers. So just that's how important this work can be if you grow it correctly. Okay.
And Bill, I think that's why we're sharing it with Renaissance as we expand it, because many other companies and businesses really don't have the knowledge, the capability, the connections, or the network, right, to put this together. I know many of us here with Top Agent Nation and Renaissance, right, our network allows people to really scale, right? That's the hardest problem with the knowledge, scalability, but the education. So Bill, if you don't mind sharing your background and why you can talk about this, besides, some of those great numbers of, we know when transactions are down, kind of similar to right now, there's other ancillary service, other businesses that really support the profitability of any company going forward.
Yeah, so I actually started in the corporate services world in the 90s. And so I have been practicing that in various ways ever since. So corporate services was originally created, I don't know if everyone knew that, by LaSalle Partners, which is ultimately what JLL became. LaSalle Partners in Chicago was the first one to actually create this. And what they decided back then was instead of just getting a one-off transaction from a company, why don't we start trying to get all of their business? So that's where that all started with, in Chicago with LaSalle Partners. And then it has obviously grown dramatically ever since then. And so what we were, what we had done is I had worked prior to Coldwell Banker Commercial. I was with a company called USI, and it was a small boutique firm, and that's what we did was we did corporate services exclusively, and it was a United Systems Integrators. The idea was integrating all of these different things together, brokerage and construction and design, all of those things were being put together into a single platform, and that was new at the time. And so, what I want to do now is I'm going to share my screen, and it's disabled. Can you make it so that I can share my screen? All right, let me see here.
Can you allow a share? There we go. Go ahead, Bill.
Okay, can everyone see it?
It's up now. Yes.
Okay, so this was we're going to set up some training in the near future for corporate services, and so this is a stack of things that we plan uh, that we're going to make as an offering so that people can understand how to win the business and exactly what it is. So let's see here. There we go. So introduction to the course, then some sample presentation and expectations of what is needed in a corporate services. So this is a description. This program has been utilized since the early 90s. We're corporate services professionals. The format is going to be a series of online sessions. And again, all of this will be tightened up, but this was kind of the idea that we have built this. Uh, the course title is going to be Working with Corporate Occupiers, Corporate Services Designation. And this can be anything from, I managed some accounts where they were government entities like the city of Philadelphia, or like the WMATA, Washington Metropolitan Area Transit Authority. And so the only people that were occupying the spaces that we were managing were employees either of the city of Philadelphia or of WMATA, Washington Metropolitan Area Transit Authority. And it can be anything from that to a retailer who is looking to grow their business, to open stores in multiple locations around the country. So it's not only managing the assets, but sometimes it's creating the assets. And there was another account that I managed, which was which is now, excuse me, a part of Ally Bank, but back then we were opening retail offices for them for mortgage sales. And so, that was we would find the location, we would move them in, or we'd find the location, negotiate it, design it, build it, and then, put all of the furniture in, and then the people would move in. And so that's, we were doing that for the corporation because we were the real estate professionals. They were the experts in selling mortgages. So, so that's what, when we're talking about working with corporate occupiers, that's what we're saying. Those are the corporate occupiers. And we also want to create a designation so that once people go through this process, then they are in a position to be able to manage an account or to do transactions, both sides of that. That if someone all of a sudden calls on one of our Renaissance people and says, "Hey, I have a requirement in your market. This is what I need," you will know how to respond to that. You'll be able to understand what it is. It's not just a transaction to the person you're dealing with. To them, it's a part of a whole series of transactions, and it's understanding why they need to have a certain level of continuity between deals. All the deals have to look alike, they have to smell alike, they have to be designed the same so that you can do volume. And if every single broker that that you deal with out in the field wants to do it in a custom way, their way, it really messes up the works. So we're going to teach people how to receive those deals and manage them the way that the client has been requesting and the way they need to see it to make decisions. Okay. So this is what we're going to do. So how to approach and do business with corporate occupiers, understand clients' business needs from their real estate needs. And sometimes that's really tricky because if you can get into the C-suite and understand what their growth or what their policies are, what their plans are, their business plans, then you can help them with their real estate needs. So, that's part of this. And then, this corporate services will, providers will learn how to provide field delivery, as I just mentioned, of corporate services using these proven tools and things that we have in the resources. The cost and all that will determine at a later date. Um, so a little bit more about me. This is, what I had been doing, what I've done in the past. These are some of the clients that I've worked with over the past. It's been a lot more than 25 years. I probably should change that. But anyway, these are some of the things that I've done in my career and some of the places that I've been. All right. So working with corporate occupiers, this course teaches how to secure and service corporate clients and provide value-added services through the field delivery local side of the assignment. So again, the idea here is to make you a valuable asset to the overall system. Okay. The format's going to be online sessions. The course will be rigorous. I mean, it's going to require, traditional classroom and 3 hours of synchronous class time online. It's an independent study assignments. There's going to be work to be done outside of the training as well. So, when we get ready to roll this out, understand that this is a commitment. It's not just I'm going to sit and watch it and then and then check the box. This is going to be working so that you can become a valuable part of an overall system that Renaissance is going to grow. Okay. So objectives to learn how to approach and do business with corporate tenants, understand clients' business needs from their real estate needs, and how to provide field delivery of the corporate services using these tools and systems. Okay. We're going to define corporate services when we roll this out. There are 3 phases that we'll talk about here in a minute. And then the conversion. Once you've got to the point to where you've got in front of the client, then how do you win that business? What is the sequence there? And then once you've won the business, first you have to source it, then you have to convert it. You then have to say, okay, now I'm in the hunt. Then you have to go in and win the business. And once you've won the business, then comes the account management. And this is the part that is really key. And this is something that ultimately you will decide as an agent whether you want to be the account manager or whether you want someone else to do that. And then you would just, become a part of that. So there's account management, and then there's also the field delivery side. There's both sides that we're going to teach. Um, and some of the things that account manager are responsible for, number one, you have to be very well organized. If you're not well organized, account management is not for you. There's reporting, there's the relationships, managing relationships, there's resourcing. It's once you're there, then where do I get all of the additional help I'm going to need for that? You have to create a plan and execute on the plan. Managing the field delivery, that's getting those guys out in the field to understand what you need, how you need it, when you need it, and why you need some of the things that you need. Okay. And then the transactions management is actually, that can just be, I used to always call this making ham sandwiches. The idea is that you want every single transaction to be the same as the last one. Then you can do volume. Okay, that's the whole idea here is efficiency. We will teach you how to be efficient from a corporate services standpoint so that you can do a lot of volume because that's where the real money is going to be. Um, then market analysis, on the local markets and then the overall market, what's going on, so that you can help the expectations with your clients so that they understand reasonably what you can do and what you can't do. If their expectations are inconsistent with what the markets are, then you've got a problem. So it's keeping that constant communication with your owner so that they know as the markets are going up or the markets are going down, individually in markets as well as overall. That is an important part of this. Executing the playbook. You got to create a playbook and then you have to execute on that. That's something that each of your clients are going to require you to do. Roles and responsibilities within that. Sometimes they're transactions managers. Sometimes you're going to have construction managers. Sometimes you're going to have administrative people, people that are going to actually manage the leases. And are you going to be paying bills for them? There's a whole series of things, and every single account is going to be custom and it's going to be different. All right. Creating an org chart. We'll show you how to do that. And then everyone can always glance at the org chart and know who reports to who and how things get done. Okay. That's very, very important. Again, if you're not a detail type person, account management is probably not what you want to do. And then, again, getting back to that reporting and then the key performance indicators. Once you've got an account, once you've decided what you're going to do, once you've put your plan out there, then you're going to have to determine how am I going to be judged as to whether or not I'm successful or not. And that's a really key important part to a contract is knowing what those key performance indicators are. How many transactions are going to be done? What kind of money, what kind of savings there should be? How much, where these locations are going to be. I mean, there's going to be a whole series of things that you're going to get judged upon. And so you want to make sure that as you build that plan, you realize that you're also going to be responsible for living up to the things you say you're going to do. So again, as an account manager, you got to be a detail person. You've got to manage people. You have to manage processes, and you have to be able to do volume. You can't go down rabbit holes. You have to focus on the overall plan and execute on that plan. Presentation skills, we'll talk about that. We'll utilize case studies from existing businesses. And the aim here is to equip students with the skills necessary to win the business. Presentation skills are very, very important. I was on, we talked about Fred Schmidt ago. I was on the phone with him earlier today. And I'll tell you, there was no one better at presentation skills. Fred was a master, and he is a master. When he would sit down in those presentations, he had a way of connecting with the people and helping them to understand what the plan was and how to win that business. He was able to go in and gain their trust. And once they had or he had their trust, then he could sell them on the things that we were trying to sell. So we will talk about some of those things, about opening and closing of the presentation, using materials, those kinds of things, because there are different ways to make these presentations. Um, we will review this and have discussions on case studies. We'll do role-playing exercises with feedback from instructors and peers and analysis of effective presentation techniques in a real-world scenario. So again, we're going to teach people how to win business, to present it, and then also how to execute on that business. So, you know, that's what we're going to be developing here with this. I think we already covered that. When I show students how to effectively open and close presentations, how to engage the audience and communicate key points clearly, strategies for handling questions and overcoming objections, how to present case studies in a compelling manner. There's also something else that I think is really important, and that is understanding that your ears, it's the old saying, you have two ears and one mouth for a reason. When you go in to talk to the client and you're presenting, you have to be receiving information too, okay? You have to be able to understand their needs, what they are trying to accomplish, and then you might have to actually adjust your presentation to that. You might have gone in with the idea that this is going to be my presentation and I've got it right here. And then come to find out as you start doing discovery that you realize that your focus is different than theirs. You need to be able to adjust your presentation to get to their focus. You can't pound a round peg into a square hole in a presentation. It's not a good idea. If they're asking for a square, you need to give them a square peg. Okay. And that is really important. And I think it's something that a lot of big companies have trouble with because they have their formats, they have their programs. This is how we do things. Mr. Client or Ms. Client, you're going to have to do it. This is how we want you to do this. And sometimes the client has their own ideas of what specifically they need. I had one scenario where we went in, we won an account, and it was based on one criteria, and they wanted it to be managed in a completely different way. And we hadn't budgeted, we hadn't presented it that way, we hadn't created our own cost based upon that. And so that was a huge mistake, that our people created. It was with a big company. And so you had a certain group of people that were doing all of these presentations and they were doing the selling. And once you got in as the account director and you started looking at what they were doing, it was very different than what the client had requested. And that was how they priced it. And it became a challenge for me. I mean, it was very, very challenging to be able. So, what I'm suggesting to you is in the process of selling, make sure you know what they need. Don't just present them with your standard cookie cutter presentation. Understand, so build your presentation around what they need. And that's why it's so important in the discovery phase. Okay. Different modules. There's going to be presentation skills, which we've talked about, effective openings and closing, engaging the audience. I think I told you once before how we went into a presentation at one point, and the we were 3 hours in a big conference room with 30 or 40 chairs There were 5 of us, there were 30 of them. And then the guy who was going to make the overall decision walked in the room, the executive vice president. He walked in and sat down and he looked at our presentation because we had done a placemat and he started studying it. And at that point, we won the account from him studying our placemat because he had a certain idea of what was needed. Once we demonstrated that we had a plan in place that we could effectively do what they needed us to do, we won that business. And so engaging the audience and knowing who the audience is very, very important. We still had to, they were a big company. It was a bank, and they had all of their people that we still had to please them as well. We had to check all the boxes, but the decision was really made when he looked at our process chart. Okay, so the other thing is handling questions and overcoming objections. That's really important. There are some people in the corporate world that they live for this. They want to be the smartest person in the room. And the secret is to make sure that they know in their mind that they are the smartest person in the world. And every question that they throw at you is a great question. And it's very, great insight, and here's how you're going to manage to that. You can't ever look at tough questions as an assault. It has to be just the opposite. Thank you for asking that question. That is important that we cover this. Okay. And then the other thing then is presenting case studies. Again, and all of this is still a work in progress at this point. What the course breakdown is going to be, proposal and presentations, RFIs, RFPs, requests for information, requests for proposal, a playbook overview, transactions management overview of transactions are a part of what this is. Creating an RFP from a generic sample. I mean, we're going to show all of that and teach how to do all of that. And then on the account management side, how to set up your reporting, what to report on, understanding relationships, understanding who's making decisions, understanding who you have to impress, right? Resourcing, who all are you going to need? In addition to yourself and your direct team, you might have to resource outside of the account for some other things. You might have to cut, and so it's understanding what resourcing will be available and then execution of a plan. Again, build a plan and then be able to execute on it. And then at a point in time, you're also going to have to be judged upon how well you execute to that plan. So all of these things are very, very important. What situations require a knowledge to sell corporate services? RFP. Many times you get an RFP, and the RFP comes out, and the person who wrote the RFP might not be the decision maker. And if it's a large organization, they may not even agree what's in the RFP. I had one circumstance where over time, as we worked on this account, it became more and more clear that the things that were in the original contract were not relevant to what they needed. So we started doing what they needed. Well, at a point in time, they hired some guy, and he was going to just, he was just going to boot us out. And so he came in and he said, "Well, I'll just hire all your people." So that's something to keep in mind when you set up your contract. Make sure that he can't do that. That happened to me in another circumstance where they did exactly that. They said, "We really appreciate everything you've done. You've taken this down from 21, contact points from our side down to between 3 and 7, depending upon the complexity of the deal. That's really all we needed you for. Thanks for everything, but we'll handle it from here." And so, that's some of the things that you need to understand is how to protect yourself from that kind of thing. So the RFP comes out, and then, sometimes you're with a rapidly growing company and they're looking for multiple locations all over the country. Help them to be successful. It's not just about creating a lot of transactions, it's creating transactions that are going to benefit the company. Because if you run them into bankruptcy, that doesn't do anybody any good. So understand what you're doing, how you're doing it, how it fits into their overall plan. And then sometimes taking over a client from an existing competitor. Well, it's important that you know. I think I mentioned one other time that we went in to make a presentation for some work, and I started noticing that the person that was making the presentation to us, that was walking us through the facility, I started to get a feeling that maybe I should be going to this other guy. So I went over and started talking to him. Come to find out, he was the decision maker. All of the people that reported to him were making the presentation. And so in that process, I found out why they were going out to bid, what the other vendor was not doing. And so I was then able to go back to our people and say, listen, here's where the focus needs to be. Do the presentation, but focus here, because this is where the failure is on the current provider. And just because I was the only one that talked to this guy, I was the only one. And we, of course, won that business because we were the only one that presented to them what they needed to hear. Okay. So understanding what that is. So, how do you begin that process? The first thing, you have to define the opportunity. What is this that they need? What is that opportunity? You need to make sure that when you define it, you can verify it with them that, yes, that's what I need. Okay. So that's a key element here. Then you interview the client. This discovery process is absolutely essential. If you want to have a good client, you want to win that client, and you want it to be successful, find out what they really need. Because again, the people, especially in larger organizations, the people that actually write the RFP may not know the real need. They may be just doing this because this is what's always been done. Okay. We had one account that had been run for 20 plus years. And, it was important to understand what was needed there, because they've been doing it for a while. They knew where the issues were. Then you have to assemble a team. You have to decide who's going to be doing what. Again, you might be the broker, you might have the relationship, the end to get to that client, but you may not want to be the manager. So you need to assemble the team. You need an account director, and then all of the other positions that are going to be required to manage that account. So assemble a good team. And then you develop your approach. You have to put together a plan that's going to work for what's needed. Going back to the interview with the client, to be able to fulfill what they're looking for. Then you write up the book. You put together that presentation playbook. Then you make the presentation, and then the most important thing to do is to follow up. And one thing, there are a variety of ways to make a good follow up, and we'll cover that, because we're going to. So, define the opportunity. What's this game? What are we going to be doing here? And then integrated management, or deal with each service provider separately. Again, understanding, are you capable? Do you have all the capabilities that are going to be necessary to fulfill this requirement? And if the answer is no, then you need to get with people that will help you to develop that. Okay. And that's the advantage of building this platform, this Renaissance platform, is even if you don't have all those capabilities, somebody in the organization will, and you can do virtually anything from a distance now. So realize that. Are there alternatives? What makes sense? Who is the competition? Who are you competing against? What are you going to have to do to win this business, to exceed what someone else is capable of doing? And sometimes it might be on price, because I guarantee you, CBRE, JLL, Cushman and Wakefield, their overhead is enormous. They've got a lot of people making seven-figure salaries and high six-figure salaries, and they got to pay those people. And how are they paying for it? They're paying for it with the fees that they're charging on these accounts. If you don't have that overhead, then you can price that a little better and still win the business and still be very, very profitable, because you're not having to, like we always call it, feed the beast. You won't have to feed the beast. Okay. There is no beast to feed when it comes to Renaissance. Are there pre-existing relationships? There are many times where, especially in a secondary and tertiary market, there are people, there are big companies in secondary and tertiary markets. If you look, you'll find out that a lot of the Fortune companies in the United States are in secondary and tertiary markets. So if you go to church with, you meet with someone, you coach your kid's baseball team, and the assistant coach works for that large organization, there are ways for you to get in. And then once you get in, then you can find out, is there room for me in this big organization, what they have? Are there opportunities for me? Okay. What are the chances of success? You need to be able to truly look at your capabilities and what Renaissance can help you provide and what your competitors are doing. Okay. You have to really understand that. You can't go in blind thinking, oh, well, they like me, so I'm going to win this business. That doesn't work that way. What's the value of the contract? I cannot tell you how many times people go in, they bid something and they can't make any money at it. Their overhead, their costs are actually greater than the fees they can charge. That's a terrible place to be. So understand what the actual value is. Okay. Make sure, because sometimes it's a cost plus. If it's a fixed fee and you know what that fixed fee is, then that's one thing. But if it's a cost plus, you need to find out what's in there. Can we make any money? I mean, if you're going to do one transaction a year and it's 1,500 square feet, that's not a very good account unless there's the facilities management side and you're going to be managing 3 million square feet. Then that 1,500 square feet, yeah, that's good, because that's just a little bit of icing on the cake, because the cake is really the facilities management of that 3 million square feet. What's the long-term potential? Always look to upsell. Always look for the opportunity to do more with that client. Once you're there, it's much easier to win new business, to win other business. And so always try to find out what can this be? This is what it is today, but what can it be in the future? Um, Again, competitive advantages and what are your weaknesses? Anytime you look at your organization or yourself and your weaknesses, then you say, okay, where can I get those weaknesses and how can I make them strength? Who else can I reach out to within the Renaissance organization? Who can I reach out to cover my weaknesses so that I have a strength there now? Okay. So that's what all of this is just now defining what the opportunity is. The next thing then is interviewing this client, and this is so important. I keep saying that over and over, but it's so important. Understand the needs before proposing a solution. Think about that for a minute. You don't want to walk in and say, I've got a solution for you, when they said, in the back of their head, they're saying, well, I haven't even told you what I need yet. Okay. So listen carefully and understand that you're not going to propose a solution until you know what's needed. All right. Then verify that you haven't overlooked anything. Prioritize. After you've done this a little bit, you know where to look, what types of opportunities exist, what is there uh, that has been said, but what hasn't been said? What is there that has not been discussed? And start asking questions, and make sure that you ask clear questions, not rambling suggestions and ideas. Ask very specifically questions that they can answer. If their response is rambling, that's fine. Listen closely, but make sure that you are very concise and clear with your questions. What types of questions? Who's the decision maker? Sometimes it's a committee. Sometimes it's an individual. It's important to know who that decision maker is, and then do everything in your power to at least present or make sure. If the decision maker is not going to be in your presentation, you might try to reschedule. It's really, really important. And some people will say, oh, well, I'm going to have my staff, cull this down a little bit and yada yada yada. You got to get in front of the decision maker so you can sell them on your capabilities. Why external solutions? Well, you need to find out what what you can do through Renaissance to try to provide that. What are the goals of the project? What does the perfect solution look like? And again, what's in the RFP might be different than what the perfect solution is. And that's something you have to work with. You have to decide your flexibility. If I start focusing over here on something that's not in the contract, I'm not being paid for that. How do I still stay profitable? And again, this other situation, they hired this guy, and what they were going to do was they were going to steal all of our employees. And well, we had a good response to that, and so we weren't allowing that to happen. And so they had to um, the, we had all of the solutions to manage what they really needed. And so what they started doing then is they started coming back saying, well, you're not doing this, 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 and this, and this. And the contract requires it. And it wasn't going to do me any good to say, yeah, but. So I just said, okay. So I would say there as the account manager, and I would work providing all of those things, all of those lists. I provided those every month. And then we also did all of the other work, but there was no additional cost. I just took it on as the account manager. So we were doing everything was in the contract and all of the other stuff they wanted. So ultimately, and this was a number of years ago, but ultimately, they said, look, we really want to do this. And we ended up getting $1 million for them to buy out of that contract. And again, this was a number of years ago. That $1 million was a lot of money. So that's those are some of the things. Assembling your team. This is so important. You need to create a list of all the services that are required. Assess then the support that you're going to need. What can you do? Are you going to be the account manager? If you're not, get somebody that has all of those capabilities. Compare services with team dynamics and capabilities. Sometimes your team might be a dynamite team on transactions, but if what's needed here is really facilities management, then all of those transaction capabilities aren't going to work for you. You need to be able to hire or bring somebody else in that can manage what's needed. Identify partners if needed to fill in gaps, and then develop that structure. And remember, it has to be done profitably. You can't do it. So if you're bringing in other people, they expect to be paid. You know, you need to make sure that you're running everything down so that you know exactly how much money is available here. Pick one of two approaches. Discussing what the plan to do is establish your experience on similar projects. If you have experience with similar projects, then obviously that's where you go down. But if you don't have, then you need to be able to discuss things that you can do, strengths that you have. And so you need to make it appear as though you have experience with similar projects. Okay. I know that sounds like being deceitful, but it's not. It's, you're out there to win this business. And if you truly believe you can do that business, then you need to convince the people that you're talking to. There's another important thing here, and that's the timeline for implementation. Once you go into that contract and you start, your team is going to be focused on executing, but there are other things that are important. And so you need to be able to have like an implementation team, and you need to include that in your pricing structure so that someone can come in and set up the bank accounts if that's what's needed, or to set up the contracts with outside, someone to draw up the contracts that you're going to need. And because then that's going to have to go to the client's got to approve the contracts. So there's a number of things that you're going to need to do implementing this that's just separate from actually managing it, and it requires a different team. And if you think you can do it all, you might be challenged with that. So something to keep in mind. A couple of things here, needed behaviors. Behave as though you already have the job. You want to have, okay, well, when we get started, here's what I want to do. Or when we get started, what are you thinking about that? You want to always have this thing and behave like you've already won that job. You also want to lead. You don't want to just be letting them kind of direct and guide and move everything all around. You want to be able to sit down and say, you know, here's our plan. All right. And if your plan is we're just now meeting you for the first time, and this is a discovery conversation, then make it clear. This is what I'm going to do in this discovery conversation. I'm going to help my team understand this and this and this and this. In other words, you want to be leading right from day one. They need to have confidence in you. All right. Ask and configure like a consultant. Again, you are going to come in, you're going to be managing something for them. So you are really acting as a consultant. You are the expert. You know what you're doing. They need to understand that you are there to consult with them to help them to improve their business. And then execute with passion and conviction. If you're not fully ready to just go to the mat for them every time, they'll know that. They need to feel that if I turn this over to you, then I can focus on the rest of my job, knowing that you're going to take care of this. So make sure that they understand how much, if you want to understand passion and conviction, just watch Jim for 5 minutes, right? And then, the type of presentation, whether it's a written proposal, in-person discussion, a PowerPoint, or a placemat, and we can talk at some point about the difference between those two. And whether it's a Teams or Zoom presentation or again, in person. There are all of those things that you have to be able to manage to. Write the presentation, 7 sections, an executive summary, the current situation as you understand it, the approach that you're going to have, your relevant experience, any details about their company and your company, compensation structure, and then a conclusion. Okay. Make that presentation, those 7 sections, make it something that they can easily read through, understand, and move forward with. Then when you go and you make that verbal presentation, tell the most persuasive story possible, consistent with the written proposal. People like stories. Develop stories, understand stories. People remember stories, okay? So as part of your presentation, be memorable. Tell them things that are relevant to them, okay? Be clear that you want their business, that you are a very important client to me and to my company. This is an important thing. Decide what will be the most impressive to the client. Again, you want to make sure that your presentation is going to really knock their socks off. Okay. Decide the size of the team presenting. That's another important thing. Sometimes, when it comes to a verbal presentation, too many people muddies things up. Not enough people makes it look like you don't have you're not too interested in their business. Get that balance, okay, of the people that you need. And then get to your points quickly. Move, 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 move. Make it so that they don't fall asleep during the presentation. All right. And then follow up. This is so important. Find reasons to reach out to them and follow up. Hey, just checking on this. Something else I was looking at. We were talking about doing some work in Indianapolis at some point. Here is an analysis of Indianapolis. In other words, do some homework, do some things that are going to provide additional, so that you're not just calling to pester them, you're calling them to tell them, to remind them about you, and then also give more information. Give them something each time. Be creative and demonstrate again that you're committed. So Jim, what is our timing? Do we have
Yeah,
about 10
no,
minutes?
I know you're, Bill, passionate about it, but I think if we could open the questions, and we'll probably do a part two,
Okay.
because this is very important. Like you were saying, you made, the money for many companies, and I know, as our industry for the last couple of years, transactions have been down. Maybe I'll open it up, and if there's no questions, maybe I'll ask a couple. But is there any questions that anyone wants to type in for Bill? But Bill, can you, I would say, with the facility management, like you were saying, like with the relationship, going to church, doing different activities, how can you identify, what account is? What is it and what isn't it? What's the difference?
That's a great question. And when you are meeting with someone and you're finding out who they work for XYZ company, and it's a big, um, it's a big job creator in your community. Just just start asking general questions. They should know what you do for a living. So, without crossing a line, it doesn't hurt to say, hey, this is the business I'm in. Do you have any idea what they do when it comes to this? Now, if they shut down, then okay, I'll back away from that. But they may volunteer, actually, a guy that I work with, he's responsible for this and he's having problems with his current provider. All right. Those are the kinds of things. So just, it if you never ask the question, the answer is always no, right? If you never ask a question, then the answer is no. The only way to get to yes is to ask the question.
Yeah. And Bill, can you put it to the last slide so they can contact you? But Max did have a great, a statement, that you don't want to blow it by coming off like you don't know what you're talking about. So how would you kind of share that with everyone? This is fine, Bill. We'll just keep you up like this. Um, Max, you want to just ask a question? Because it was a great statement. You're right, because you don't want to come off bad and they just discount you. Go ahead, Max.
Yeah, exactly. I've been in situations where people, come in and try to make that kind of presentation. And unfortunately, they do not have the complete knowledge nor the uh, gumption to come in and say what they're trying to say. And as a result, they end up blowing the whole meeting. And that's when they send you a note or a message that we change our mind. We don't want to go through this process and everything. So somebody needs to go into these meetings with, say, your help in the beginning or the first 2, 3 meetings with future clients in order to develop that kind of confidence to be able to make a great presentation to impress everyone, not just the regular attendees, but the president and the CEO of the company to be able to have a buyout on you.
Yep. I agree 100%. And again, that's all a part of that whole discovery thing. You need to find out who, if the president's the one who's going to make the decision ultimately, then you got to find out what are his hot buttons. Look him up online, find out what he's done, what he's thinking. He may have written about his company. There may be newspaper articles about him. Find out about what he's trying to accomplish with his company, and then make sure that your presentation is guided toward what his overall plans are for the organization. Absolutely.
Bill, and I've learned while sitting in your course, you're right, the intro course into corporate services that you and Fred did, and you're right. How you put the material together, how Fred did the pitch. I mean, you guys were very seasoned veterans, running large companies or being involved in their leadership with like JLL or CBRE, right? Then running Coldwell Banker Commercial. So it wasn't that you just woke up one day and did it. And I think that's why the intro course into corporate services is really how to walk and talk correctly without embarrassing, but turning it over to the team that could actually make the presentation to corporate execs or leadership. And you got one chance. Hopefully you even got that chance to get there. But if you got that chance, you want to put your best foot forward and you don't want to blow it. So I do encourage everyone listening to reach out to Bill. Bill, if you don't mind putting your information or your QR code for those that are watching, is to scan it and reach out, because we will be putting intro course together. Fred is still obviously very involved, just busy in a different part of life. But a lot of us, we still want to add different parts with Renaissance, from the corporate services, facility management, asset property management, capital markets. You're going to see a lot more that you as an individual, if you're in brokerage, commercial brokerage, or wanting to be in commercial brokerage, but wanting to tap into a larger network with all of us. This is where Top Agent Nation, working with Renaissance and many other groups, are working with us as we expand, right, this capability. And that's what it is. People have the relationships, and many of us know you may not have the transaction right away. You may not have the leasing or something like that, but you do need to start preparing and getting ready with the property. And a lot of times the other services knows what's going on before they do want to transact. So, Bill, I just want to thank you. Please reach out to Bill. He's part of our Renaissance team. He's always a guest speaker, like many people here, to help us really build our network, not just domestic, but globally, and really the capability and expertise to help you win those deals. And Max, I'm glad you brought that question up, because yes, you do want to come off the best way. So I would always encourage people to reach out to Bill to learn the intro course, so you basically understand what you say, what you don't say, how you should act, and then where you should go afterwards, like to Bill or Fred or the rest of the team that has that expertise in corporate services, because they will want to see that resume to take the next step to even make a proposal or a pitch. And Bill, I've always watched you and Fred with your courses, and boy, you won some really nice accounts. But any final words, Bill, before we say goodbye to everyone?
No, again, I've just put my information in the chat, and do give me a call. I'm happy to share. It seems enormous, but it's really not. It's like anything else. You eat that elephant one bite at a time, and we can show you how to take each of the individual steps to get you there. So if you've got a contact or someone that can get you in a door, we can, it's like Fred used to always say, you chase the bear into the cave and we'll club it.
I love that. Well, everyone, thank you for joining Top Agent Nation Commercial Wednesdays. More topics, ideas, comments, relationships where we're growing. But please join our Renaissance Friday groups, and as a member to be more specific in certain product type specialties and courses like what Bill's going to be offering. So we look forward to taking this journey together every Wednesday. So please join us. And Bill, thank you so much for being our guest this week.
You bet.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.